So it turns out that patch 12.9 brought my favorite comp in this entire set back to life, which is why I wanted to share it with you. And I'm talking about Alistar carry. Now you might think that Alistar carry is a bit of a meme, but honestly it's pretty solid. So I ended up having an account where I made a challenge to only get to master with by playing Alistar carry. I ended up having to stop the challenge because they ended up killing the Alistar. Because Riot didn't want him as a carry, but for the fun patch they ended up giving that comp a considerable amount of buffs. So I immediately went back onto my account, got myself a second place, a first place, and got myself to master. So definitely this comp has some staying power. Just to go over a little bit about the amount of buffs that this comp received. We have to talk, first up, we have to talk about the Dragon Eggs. Now there's going to be a tome every single game for you from the Dragon Egg. Which in return will give you a pretty high chance of getting a Socialite Emblem. Socialite Emblem will enable you to run 5 Socialites, which is pretty solid buff for the Alistar. Additionally, they ended up adding a 3-piece Colossus bonus, which ends up giving your Colossus 800 more HP for a total of 1600. This is also very useful, and this allows you to run Cho'Gath much more in the mid game as well, and you can even keep him until the very end if you want to. Something that's a bit more minor is that the Socialite buff now gives 3% more damage. Obviously nothing game breaking, but you also have to take into consideration that because of the increased amount of tomes and the increased amount of 5 Socialites, that this will double, and definitely nothing to sneeze at. And last but not least, we have the Alistar buffs themselves. He has a decreased mana cost, he has a 75% increased damage on his 2-star, with a 50 increased damage on his 1-star. And technically this he has a stun duration nerf, but honestly it doesn't matter because this is the stuff that's going to make him viable again. So how does this comp look? Well, I have a few different versions for you here. First up, we have the 3 Colossus version. Now as for itemization, I would recommend on giving Alistar 2 damage items together with the Titan's Resolve. In some cases the Titans can be something like a Bramble, but I kinda like Titans because it's a good mix of an offensive and a defensive item, and you definitely will require a lot of damage items to get Alistar to work, because he needs to heal himself up, and he can only do this if he is actually dealing a considerable amount of damage. As for the other items, they don't really matter as much. Obviously, stacking some sort of like Zika or Chalice onto Ignore, putting him next to the Alistar, is one of your best choices, but you can itemize on Cho'Gath, on Seraphine, on Galio. It really doesn't matter as much as long as you get your crucial core for Alistar. Here we have a different version. This used to be the version I played before the patch 12.9. It includes the Orianna and the Braum. The Braum gives you CC together and gives Bodyguard together with the Galio. Orianna will give you Enchanter together with Senna and provide additional CC and allows you to get a good ult up if the opponents are trying to clump on the opposite side of the Alistar. But this comp, I'm not sure, like you can run it from time to time, especially with the Orianna buffs, but you will always have to react to what the game gives you. The only real core is running 3 Socialites, 2 Colossi, and the rest is just up to your own imagination. For example, here we have a version where you ended up getting a Socialite emblem from your tome. In this case, we will be running 5 Socialites, put the Alistar on the Socialite emblem. You can run a Braum or an Orianna here, or something completely different if you want. You can try to include Cho'Gath, but that is a lot more difficult. I think you require level 9 for this. You can do it if you want to. It's definitely an option. Having 800 more HP on the Alistar can definitely be useful. As for openers and win condition, so I would usually recommend trying to do just a win streak opener in any way possible. I think running something like a VIP Brand or a Corki Lucian with Twin Shot can be a pretty solid opener. I like to start the glove in the first carousel, trying to rush for a Jeweled and an IE. But yeah, you should just, the most important thing is that you have a pretty good early game, because sometimes you can struggle in the mid game to stabilize until you manage to find your Alistar 2-star. It's also possible to item dump on champions like Misfortune or even Vi if you end up finding a lot of her. As a general rule of thumb, you don't have to immediately sell your board and put every item on the first Alistar that you find. Usually it makes sense to make the pivot once you have him on 2-star. And so don't be afraid to run something like even a Y 2-star throughout stage 4 and then try to make a large pivot with level 8 in stage 5, for example. As for win conditions, I mean, there's different ways of approaching it. You obviously you would want to end your game with a Galio 2-star and an Alistair 2-star having pretty strong items. Sometimes though this isn't enough. Sometimes you will be required to push towards level 9, either add a Cho'Gath for 3 Colossus or add another 2-star legendary. I would not recommend running Silco in this comp though. This is usually going to make things more difficult. Something I would recommend is you should scout a lot to see if Alistair is contested, and if not, you can stay on level 8 and try to get him to 3-star. If you end up hitting Alistair 3-star, it's pretty much a guaranteed win, and you can get this surprisingly often, so don't hesitate, but do make sure that you scout before going for it. Overall, this is definitely one of my absolute favorite comps to play on this patch, and since the last patch has been dubbed the for fun patch, I would suggest you try it out and have some fun yourself. I hope you learned something, and see you the next time.